Thank you. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Licensing Committee meeting. Members, could I ask you if you're happy to agree? We're on an echo. This is dreadful. If you're happy to agree the minutes of the meeting held on the 23rd of March 2022. Agreed? Any abstentions? Oh, thank you. Julie, do we have any apologies?
Oh, thank you. At the end of the minutes, Councillor Ashby brought in a proposal for spreading things over 3 years increases. We then go on to the actual formal motion. It doesn't say anywhere that his proposal was not supported. I think it should. He appears to have been proposing an amendment.
Thank you. We'll amend the minutes. Any other matters to bring up on the minutes? No, thank you. Julie, apologies, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I have apologies from Councillor Ashby, Councillor Bowes and Councillor Mark Kittle-Morris.
Thank you, Julie. And urgent business, if we have any? Officers, do we have any urgent business? No? And declarations of interest from any members? No, no declarations of interest. We don't have any non-members here wishing to address the meeting. So we will go into the introduction with a new licensing team leader, Keith Mumford. Keith, over to you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, members, for allowing me to present today. It's the first opportunity I've been really sort of like given to present to you and let you know the sort of changes in the new team structure. So I've got a few slides, and I will, after the slides, open the floor for any questions, and hopefully I'll be able to sort of answer those. The Chair has given me permission to leave after this presentation to help colleagues with the Ashiel emergency, so hopefully that will be okay. So there has been a change in our structures, and basically from our point of view the licensing is coming into a bigger team, but from the actual directorate, we've got the Health and Housing Directorate, okay, and the director is Steve James, assistant director is Sarah Shipley, that I believe that you would know, and basically the service manager is Craig Fowler. And basically the changes have merged into environmental health and licensing to two main teams. So I'm team leader of one of them. So it's food safety and licensing now. That's the bigger team, and we'll come on to that in a minute. And the other team and the other members of the actual main sort of changes of environmental protection, so it's the noise nuisance and water sampling and those sort of things. So basically the new team. So from our point of view, just to give you an idea, obviously I've put in some key sort of like things in the slide. So with the licensing side, some of the key elements are licensing committee, licensing compliance, safety advisory group and animal welfare. But sitting underneath that, we also, as a larger team, deal with the food hygiene and the registration of the premises approval. So it's all the big manufacturers, if you will. Food exporting and importing, quite a big area there. And public health, control of infectious diseases. And that team was dealing with all the COVID issues. And from now on, we're sort of looking at monkeypox and other viruses and one thing and another that are emerging. Health and safety, inspections and accident investigations. Currently that team are dealing with some fatalities. And so it's quite a lot of work there. Asbestos, animal disease, including avian flu, etc. And also registration of premises, which really comes under licensing as well. And that's the skin piercing, as the acupuncture and tattooing and those sort of things. So that just gives you a flavour of what the broader team deals with. So I'm team leader, and these are the members of the team, which hopefully will help you if you've got any sort of like queries going on and you want us to look at various things. And I've been lucky enough to already deal with a few issues with the chair and to see if I can assist in different ways with street traders, for example. So under my wing would be Josie, senior licensing officer with vast experience and vast knowledge of the licensing activities, and Al as well, good old licensing, animal licensing officer, who just currently carried out an inspection of Banham Zoo. Okay, and he may be able to give us some insight on that inspection that carried out yesterday. Then licensing officer, which is a fairly new post with Paul Bagier, and there will be an element of training for that post, and we need to make sure that is robust and happens very quickly, and measures are in place to assist with that. Then we've got Laura, who's a very experienced officer in her own right, and's got wealth of knowledge into the licensing functions, and Julie Wright also. In the other side of the team, a team leader that I've worked very closely with, and I will do after this meeting, is Paul Bradbury. So anything to do with food or health and safety, Paul is looking after that realm with me as well. Then sitting underneath that, food officers, Stephanie Waterman, Joe Sanders. And there is another senior post that's been put out for advertisement. And we'll be losing quite a unique character in Jeremy Hadaway, who's retiring, which is sad, because over COVID, I worked very closely with him, and he was a very good officer to have at your side to deal with all these sort of poultry plants and from a health and safety connotation. Okay, so what about me? Okay, so I'll make no pretenses regarding my experience with licensing. I have got experience with licensing, but not as much knowledge regarding my two colleagues sitting by me, and I will be looking to build on my experience and also knowledge. But some of the qualifications I've got is first degree in environmental health that did cover training of licensing activities, a master's in food safety control, a sort of PG dip in health and safety management, and so forth. Also, I'm a chartered environmental health officer. And the reason why I mention that is because we cover so much, a vast area, from food hygiene to health and safety to public health, and now licensing as well. So all those elements are included. Okay, so going on to experience, these are the sort of things I've been involved in, but not so much on the process of applications and one thing or another. So I have been a responsible officer for nuisance and made representations to honourable committees such as yourself. And also when I was working in London 6 years ago, I was sort of like heavily involved in the London Stadium and some of the big sort of like venues around that area. Also sort of like the Safety Advisory Group, which I have got quite a lot of experience in, and some of the things that quite novel, Rugby World Cup in the Tour de France, which started in this country several years ago and then moved on to Paris and so forth. So certainly throughout my career, I've had a lot of sort of like dealings with street traders. I don't know too many officers who haven't. And also provision of late night refreshments, pubs and clubs, registration that we've touched on already, animal sort of like boarding, and also run a contract for abandoned dogs in Forest Heath District Council as was then. Scrap dealers, camping sites, multi-agency partnership working like you would expect, where we would join together with the actual emergency services to have a look at all different areas of licensing, food hygiene, health and safety and so forth. We've also had some dealing with gambling act profiling in London, East London in particular. And we was really interested in the sort of poverty side there, where there was a lot of sort of betting shops in a sort of like close proximity, and people were spending their sort of like income in all these betting shops, and there weren't enough money to feed themselves. So we got heavily involved in profiling there. Been involved in HMO licensing, which is different, and it is tackled in all intents and purposes by another department. Slaughterhouses, which has moved on, and the reason why I moved on, mentioned that, because more farm, we've been involved in that as well. The slaughterhouses are approved now, and we get also involved in that when the approval stops. It comes back to the local authority to actually deal with. Okay, so a lot of my time has been spent really in compliance and enforcement. Been involved in high court cases, coroner's court, which is the saddest court to be involved in, Crown Court, Magistrates Court, and so forth, and used to giving expert witness in different courts and different locations and committees. So from my point of view, that is quite a blast through where we are now. And being an honourable committee like we've got here today, I guess that you've got some questions about the temerity of me sort of like being sort of like the team leader of the licensing side of it. So I'm going to try to answer your questions, and please feel free to ask me anything, and I will do my best to answer. Thank you very much, Chair. Any questions, please?
Sorry, committee, any questions? I'm sure there must be. Linda?
Combination of question and comment. I'd say, since we know Josie well, she's got the detail and experience for that field, and having heard that you have an umbrella of experience that goes from one end of the range to the other, I can only say, is there anything you know you've got a weak spot on where you don't know much that you haven't mentioned? Because I'd say, from the sound of it, you've got most of what you're going to need.
Thank you very much for your question. If you notice, I was very careful in hiding some of the sort of like aspects of sort of like weaknesses, but it's only fair that I should, bring them out. So yes, I've got a vast experience, but with licensing, it's process. And to be honest with you, I will not have the knowledge that Josie's got or Al has got. So from my point of view, it's really using that umbrella of experience and where we can best use it and support the team. The team itself, from a licensing point of view, I regard as being strong, but hopefully with Paul Bashir coming on and me coming on and getting a better understanding, we will be better in the future. The aspects that I'm looking at currently are the big events. So it's the Safety Advisory Group. So in Breckland in particular, we do have a lot of events, and also some sporting events such as Snetterton, for example, and the Raceway. And the reason why I mention that, unfortunately, we do get some serious accidents there. So it helps us keep control of those areas. But coming up to the event season, we've got Maui Wowie coming online, which is a big event, a music event. Centre Park, which is another big music event. We just finished another event with the Steam Engine Rally. So we was there on Friday and Sunday dealing with sort of like issues. So my weakness is with the process. So I'll be taking the opportunity to work with my colleagues to bring me up to speed in those areas. But also, hopefully, I can put some help colleagues with the compliance and enforcement and the safety aspects. So hopefully that answers your question. Thank you.
Do we have any other questions? Susan?
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Keith. I just wondered, as you're new to the post, is there anything that you think, oh, I'd really like to get my teeth into that aspect?
So my main role at the moment is just bringing myself up to speed. But the areas that I would really want to get involved in is the safety advisory group, where we work with partners. And so from my point of view, I think that's where I really want to be involved in, because some of those events are having 5,000 people per day. If you look at Snetterton, it could be 60,000. So it gives us an opportunity to use that umbrella to the best effect with Josie and with Paul. So I think that's an area where we can sort of build on and develop for the benefit of our visitors and the general public. So that is one area. The other area as well, I guess, would be from a compliance point of view. And the team at this moment is strong, which is unusual, because I usually, when I get involved in taking over a new team, it's usually weak and one thing and another. And it's not the case, thankfully, because they're in the other parts of the team, there are some urgent matters which I also need to focus on. So that's good for me, but we do need to not only deal with that area, but also training. So I want to make sure that I can support the rest of the team with sort of like providing training for them in different areas. And we talked about Paul. So for me, compliance and the safety advisory group, I think are the two key things for me. And anything Josie or Al throws at me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Keith. Very thorough and interesting. Richard.
Obviously you haven't been in position long. Do you have anything within your early stages of getting and retaining staff? Because I've been on this committee for a long while, and the turnover of staff has been horrendous. You know, whether you've had time to find out whether it's a management problem or whether it's you know, general lack of interest in that side of the job. But you know, like I said, for many years I've gone in there, and Josie's the only one who's still in there, and I don't believe Josie was there when I first got on the committee. You know, that's something that really needs to be addressed. So we've got some continuity of staff.
Thank you very much for the question. And I totally agree with you. And the word that I would use, and I have used, is support, because we've got a lot of talented people. And if there was a lesson to be learned from a management side, was with COVID. Suddenly everyone was asking for experts in COVID, and there wasn't any. But the team, certainly all of us, environmental health, including licensing, as was, you know, sort of rolled up our sleeves and got mucked in. And that's when you really know the true value of individuals. And we really did there. And I could spend all day talking about the various stories of going into poultry houses where, you know, 75% of their staff were coming down with COVID and things like that. And you're absolutely right. And it is a management problem. That's the way I regard it. It's my own opinion. If we can't retain staff, then we've got to ask ourselves why. There are a number of staff that are just not sort of like got the aptitude for the post, and there'll always be better offers, and you can't stop that, and all you can do is wish people well. But I think what I'm going to try to offer is support and stability, and work with all members of the team to make sure, as much as we can do, because the finances is not infinite, is to sort of like say what we can provide. And it could be that, and certainly we've done that already, you know, where we can reward people, we will do. So I think you're absolutely right. It's a brilliant question, and hopefully we can, you know, sort of like work on that, you know, with the other sort of like seniors and, you know, more experienced officers, but hopefully in the future our best view at this moment is trying to retain staff, because it takes us away from the front line, if you like. And so I think that's a very valid question. Thank you very much.
Philip.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wondered, really asking a specific question, how do you feel you have the resources and an approach to tackle the avian flu, which is such an economic issue, and probably Bretland is the most concentrated area?
So avian flu, yeah, it's a one that's creeping up on us, to be fair. And it's a one that, because of the COVID side, it was under the radar. But equally, me and colleagues got involved in that from a cross-contamination, if you like, going onto farms, going on to sort of like the poultry or egg producers and one thing or another. And you're absolutely right. It's an emerging virus that could equally be as important as the other viruses that we've seen. So we are keeping a keen eye on that. Have we got resources to deal with that? We work with colleagues as well from trading standards, so they've got quite a lot of sort of responsibility for that. So, but from a health and safety point of view, we certainly was going on farms and getting involved in their disinfection and making sure that was done properly. And we was worried about the zoonosis side of it, so where it could be transferred onto humans. At this moment in time, I would say it's okay, but in the future, we would have to see how we get on. But there's various organisations that we can link into, and we do, such as the UK Health Security Agency. That's one of them. That's the old public health, if you will. Health and Safety Executive, training standards, and so forth. So between us as an entity and together, at this moment in time, it's okay, but it's one to watch. Thank you.
Thank you, Keith. Committee, do we have any other questions for Keith? No? In that case, Keith, thank you very much for a very interesting update and answers to the questions. And I know that you've got important stuff to go and do, so please feel free to leave. We'll see you next time.
Thank you very much for allowing me to present and asking so many interesting questions. And thank you very much, and I hope to catch up with you in due course. But thank you, Chair, for allowing me to leave, because I'm involved in sort of like some quite urgent business. Thank you very much.
Right, we'll move on to item 7, please, when we've got an update from the Animal Welfare Licensing Officer, Alan Goodall. Alan, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. We're just going to sort the IT out. Back in the room. Thanks again, Madam Chair. Thanks for having me, allowing me to speak today. That's me, Animal Licensing Officer, also covers welfare. I've been here now just over a year, and I'm delighted to be able to come and speak to you about the sort of wonderful things I've been up to on your behalf. So, like I said, just over a year, I think, yeah, about 15 months, something like that. It's still the best job at the council, as I said when I first arrived all those years ago. So what I thought I'd do is give you a bit of a taste of where we are. Animals, very, very important, big rural economy here in Breckland. So I thought I'd give you a quick overview of the state of the industry as sort of the way it appears to me. There's several things that I cover: dog breeding, catteries, kennels, riding schools, things of that nature. Now, during lockdown, I think most people, it's no surprise to know that the sales of dogs went absolutely through the roof. And the analogy I use is that an average, there's no such thing as an average Labrador, but a little black Labrador, probably the puppy, would be somewhere between £2,000 and £3,200, which was absolutely crazy. That has now settled down to around about 850 for an average pet Labrador, which I think is probably where it should be. During that period, we did have here at Breckland an awful lot of people who were breeding illegally. So part of my role then was to chase those people down and either use enforcement tactics or bring them on to make sure they became licensed breeders. And there was quite a lot of that. Now, during lockdown, a lot of dog daycare premises, a lot of kennels really struggled because no one was going on holiday. Everyone was buying dogs, but no one was wanting to put them in kennels, etc. So a lot of those places suffered. I think some were successful, some of the bigger places were successful in getting grants, but a lot of the smaller places were not. And sadly, we lost a couple. Conversely, that's now changed. Now the price of dogs has gone through the floor, as it were. What we're seeing now is all that the kennels and catteries are now actually seeing everything come back up again. So they're all very happy, and long may that last, because we don't really want to lose anybody. I see my role here primarily to support business, and I get a great deal of pleasure out of that, doing that. In terms of riding schools, I think we've lost a couple, but I don't think that was in relation to the COVID. It was really in relation to, you know, people wanting to retire and things like that. We have been able to support the ones that we've still got. So we have done, I think, quite a good job with that. Yeah, I think that's fairly good. Pet shops during lockdown, etc., saw a big rise in profits. We've got some really unusual pet shops as well, which is great. People selling coral and mad things like that, when there's a big market for it. And I think basically because we are such an animal local authority, it's a big part of what we do. We've got a lot of people with it, and I get a great deal of pleasure looking after our people. So our strategic approach then really has been to look after the businesses. In terms of illegal breeding, it's better to not to prosecute, but to try and get them licensed. So then that brings them under our control, as it were. But it also invokes the powers that I have. Without it, I don't really have any powers. So we try and bring them in under our wing, as it were. Most people are very happy to come under our wing and say, well, you know, I'm sorry, I didn't know. And that's, you know, we'll take that if they become licensed. So we're very happy with that. But it's really, for me and the department, it's really about supporting the businesses that we've got, trying to make things easy for them to get these licenses, to try and demystify some of the regulation, because a lot of it is confusing. So we demystify the regulations for our clients in order to help them and to make sure that they're supported by Breckland. So what have we actually done? So we have at the moment 78 active animal licenses. I'm working on 12. I've dealt with around about 50 complaints in a year. There's actually, some are hidden because some things don't always go on the machine because they can be fairly quickly sold. Now, as a comparator, Norwich have 13 animal licenses, Norwich City. I think we're probably one of the biggest in our group, as it were. So that's where we are. I would say about 15 of those are new businesses that I've found over the course of the last year. So I think we probably brought around about, is that right, boss? Around about 15 new businesses in. Either people that have come to me and said, how do we apply? Or people that I've found who were trading illegally, as it were, that we've brought under our wing. So that's what we've done. So that's not bad, I don't think. Enforcement action, just touched on that. It's better to bring someone within the regime and take fees from them than it is to go through costly legal proceedings. I haven't actually, there's been, I think, there have been 2 venues here since I've been here that I suppose some people would call puppy farms. Now they've been shut down. We didn't need to do it. There's more than one way to skin a cat, and it's better to do things, provided everything's legal and above board, which it was. It's better to do things without a prosecution, in my humble opinion, because there would have been absolutely no point, and certainly nothing for the public interest in going after the 2 people that came up, and obviously I won't share the details. And I think puppy farm is probably a bit of a misnomer for a lot of these places. It's just people maybe get into some sort of trouble and can't cope with what they're doing. So I chose different approaches to prosecute. It didn't seem worth it, fair, or cost productive. So that's what we've done. And as I said, and as I've gone throughout this, I've got 2 or 3 investigations going on at the moment. I'll let you know if well, you'll see it in the papers, because that's what we'll be putting it if we do prosecute someone. So there's a couple of people that I'm currently looking at. And we've always got a couple that we're looking at, but sometimes it's never straightforward. So that's what we do with enforcement action. But like I said, always better to get them licensed. That brings in all the powers and everything else. Training. So since I've been here, I've had a couple of bits of training. I've been trained in licensing zoos. I've been trained in birds of prey, and I've got some more training coming up in relation to some changes around the Zoo Licensing Act. So it's very, very valuable. It's been really, really helpful. I've been fully supported. I'm really well supported by my manager and also by this committee, madam. So thank you very much indeed. It is really, really appreciated. We understand that I'm expensive, but hopefully I'm value for money. I think I am. Funding. So we've done quite a few exciting things since I've been here around funding. When I first arrived, we were doing a lot of things for nothing, as it were. We were giving out a lot of free advice. The first thing we've done is so if you're a dog breeder, if you want to start a new business, the only really way, if you're a new business with no experience of council regulation or government DEFRA regulation, the only way to do it is get some help. Now, there aren't any consultancy firms out there doing this at the moment, but there'll probably be a niche at some stage for it. So we took the view that I went around originally during lockdown and was giving out advice for free. Now, obviously, we sat down with Joe's and okay, enough's enough now, because people were getting an awful lot of free advice. So we're now charging for pre-inspection visits. It is almost a guaranteed license, I guess, but it enables me to spend lots of time with them. And it's not a massive fee, but it's really popular. People are very, very willing to pay the fee. It's £179 basically, which is really, really useful. And now it enables me to spend that time with them, to go through the paperwork and to help them. And I think, and I will keep saying this, one of the things I get the biggest pleasure out in this job is helping, especially new young businesses who invested a lot of money in what they're trying to do, to go around and to be able to provide the help from this authority. I really, really get a real pleasure out of that one. So that's one thing we've done. We're also looking into increasing the funding for some franchise animal businesses who have one license on the district, but several businesses here. It's called a franchise dog boarding or something like that. And we will then be looking to charge them a little bit more for the inspections, because we're doing the inspections, and it's only fair that obviously, and it puts them on a level playing field with all the other animal businesses. So that's fair, and that's what we're going to do. But it's little bits and pieces all help, right? New business support, as I've said, I think apart from doing the zoo, one of the career highlights this year, there was a young chap in Watton who set up an aquarium business. He had a lot of help from me, and he'd obviously put a lot of money into the business. I was able to reprioritize what I was doing, to turn around and get that license, turn around quick for him, so he could start trading and earning money. And I was really, really pleased. And that's really what I think we're here for, to support local businesses. And I think that was just one of the best things. So that's something, like I said, I get a real pleasure out of. Banham Zoo, okay, big important employer for us. I've done several zoos in a different authority. This was the first one which I would describe as a big zoo. You know, they've got giraffes and some real super animals down there. They had their inspection yesterday. They did really well. I'll leave it there because obviously it's some commercially sensitive bits and pieces, but I'm very proud. They worked extremely hard. It's been inspected by several vets. It's very challenging. It's very expensive, and they did really, really well yesterday. So I think I'll leave that one there. But for me, definitely a career highlight. I was very pleased to be part of the inspection team yesterday. So good for them. And it was 40 degrees. Need to do something about that. Media, okay. So we work with Nathan in comms. We've done things on Twitter to talk about, you know, there's some standard stuff around the dog is not just for life, it's for Christmas. There's some other bits and pieces in there, like you need to be legal, otherwise I will find you, and I will. And things like that. So we're putting out different key messages at different times. It's proven quite popular with our customers. So we are out there talking to people, obviously through the different like Twitter and all those sorts of things, and obviously here today as well. So we are talking to people through that medium, and it has proved quite popular. So Norwich City Council Consulting, as I said, Norwich have only got about 13 animal business, and currently they don't have somebody like me because it takes a lot of money and time to train someone like me. So I'm currently helping out Norwich on my days off, which is bringing in some more income for the department, and I'm going around doing all their animal licenses. It's obviously not costing Brecon taxpayers anything. They're paying us a fee, which has been sorted out through senior management for me to go and work for them on my days off, and it's quite fun actually. It's quite fun. But that's that. Animal Licensing Group, another big success we've had. It's every council does something a bit differently in terms of animal licensing and in all sort of parts of licensing. So I think one of the first things that we did when I got here was set up an animal licensing group, which you're all welcome to attend. I know we've been well supported by the chair. So that brings in now animal license officers from all the councils around us. We've now got Suffolk involved, and so we've got Suffolk, all the Norfolk councils. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to make sure there's consistency right across both counties. So we will sit down, it's hosted here, and we're very lucky to have these fabulous facilities we've got. And we talk about anything that's relevant. We also have guest speakers come along. We've got the Kennel Club, I think, lined up for the next one. We haven't done one since last December, because obviously there's been a lot of changes within the authority. And I didn't really quite know whether I was going to be in post for another year. Fortunately, I'm going to be, so thank you very much for that. And so we've had lots and lots of interesting speakers, lots and lots of interesting vets have come down to talk to us, and it's really helping us drive animal welfare and a consistent message across for animal welfare across both Norfolk and Suffolk. So it's really, really good. We've had lots of positivity about it, and I'll be sorting out another one very soon. If anyone would like to come, if you're interested in animals, I think it's fascinating. So please come along. Okay, so that's me. Questions?
Is there anywhere online on our webpage if the small breeder, if they just wanted to, make some money or earn a few quid out of breeding just a couple of dogs, how easy would that be to find that out? Because I wouldn't know where to start. Not that I'm going to do it, but for anyone else out there.
It's quite complicated, Councillor, the legislation. I don't think we have anything on our website. There's plenty of resources out there, because another part of the commercial thing I was looking at was maybe we could put some documents on to say this is how you do it, but there's so many commercial opportunities out there which are doing it so much cheaper than we could. My details are all over the website, and I think it's well known that if you want to, if you are interested in this sort of thing, then give this guy a call. I think that would probably be fair to say.
There are web pages available as well on
Yeah.
the website, but obviously it's not specific to somebody just wanting to dogs, because the legislation comes into effect and we have to assess. That's what part of what his job is assessing whether or not they require a license, whether they meet the threshold.
I think also getting my name out there was very important, and doing the things on Twitter so people know who I am. They know I'm not the enemy, and I'm here to help. And I've never failed to get back to someone, you know, pretty quickly if they're interested in having a new business. I think it's really, you know, I think you know, as public servants, it's really important that we keep our promises. And if someone leaves a message, then we get back to them. And yeah.
Vera, you're first.
Just a couple. There used to be a Good Citizen dog organisation where you could go and just make your dog walk on a lead, let you go through a gate first, sit when it was told, nothing elaborate. Is that still in operation, do you know? I can't seem to find it. You went and then you got a certificate to say your dog was a good, you know, citizen dog, as it were, that didn't chase after things and no.
And some of it, but I don't think it is, to be honest. Certainly not a Brecon. We're not doing it. But
It was being done by the dog warden. There was specific training, wasn't it? I have to say, we don't get involved in the dog warden service other than the fact he's licensed. So yeah, I have no idea whether that's still going or not.
That was the first one. The second one, you see all these people putting adverts out to say, I'll walk your dog, I'll look after your dog while you're on holiday, either at your house or at my house. You know, I'll just take it out for a walk, I'll come in and check. Are all these people licensed, or is it just a way of making money?
so the thing to remember, it's not an offence to make money out of that. Right? Dog walking is not licensable. There is talk in government circles that it may become licensable. There are guidelines. So if someone was to come around your house and look after your dog for money, that's not licensable generally. And there are some financial ceilings that you need to reach before looking after other people's dogs is licensable. I mean, most of the illegal activity we have, in fairness, is dog breeding, but there is a lack of knowledge out there about how much you can earn, etc., because some of the stuff that, for instance, the Kennel Club put out is wrong, quite frankly. And it's not, yeah, that's pretty much how it is. But generally, dog walking, like I said, dog walking isn't, you know, people come around your house isn't. But it's possible that if you're looking after, you know, more than one dog on a regular basis, then you would need a license for that. That'd be dog home boarding.
Mike.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Anna. I found that very interesting, and I'm not an animal lover, so that's a high compliment. I wanted to come back to your issue about Banham Zoo, and you said that you had that there was an inspection. I'm used to different kinds of inspections. I was in education, so one of the difficulties we had, and I'm asking really whether you surmounted it, is that there was never any useful follow-up, never any advice really. It was all a question of panning you or praising you or whatever. Is there a method by which you or your team go back to Banham, or at least offer to go back to Banham and say, you've had this inspection, you should be doing things better in certain ways. Can we help, or what's the evidence that you've improved?
That's a really good question. So I think in terms of education versus Banham Zoo, this is probably worse for them than Ofsted. It's a really difficult inspection for them. I see, as I've said, I see my role to support businesses. Banham is a very important business for us. So I will be continuing to visit them and helping them as much as I can. They had a really good inspection. So post-match, if you like, part of my role is to check that everything's been done properly. Part of my role is to make sure that the license has been written properly and they know exactly where they stand. But I've been really impressed with Banham, you know, And part of my role is to provide the ongoing support for them should they need it, and just say, look, how are we doing with this, guys? And there's a lot of pragmatism involved as well, councillor. So it's just, you know, it's not about hitting them over the head with a stick or any business. It's about supporting them throughout the journey. And I think I really do passionately believe that that's my role here. And it seems to work. I think people operate better, you know, if you work with them as opposed to chasing them around all the time. So they will, I hope to answer your question, they will be getting a lot of ongoing support from me. I'll have to go back there anyway to go through some other things that we didn't cover yesterday as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike. Taylor?
I was just going to say, when you were given the presentation and you spoke about the way that COVID affected the industry, obviously you see a lot in the headlines at the moment about the cost of living crisis and how that will affect people that have pets. And I would assume that would then go as far as, you know, businesses that have animals. Have we noticed a demand in that because of that? And if so, what support is being given or would be earmarked to be given?
Sorry, councillor, in terms of funding, you mean?
Just in like terms of support, so that might be funding or that might be practical support.
I haven't seen, I'm not quite sure what funding is available. I know that during lockdown there was some of the bigger businesses that horses, I think, riding schools, because horses are really expensive to vet and everything. They received some help, I think. A lot of the smaller businesses were unable to. In terms of ongoing business support from me personally, once I've gone in and sort of done everything I need to do, then they just operate as a business, and if they need me, they can call me. But it's kind of there isn't really. I haven't noticed that in terms of my own personal support. I mean, part of the regulation is that I speak from a regular basis, pretty much halfway through the license, and I do that. And there's obviously some you need to be ringing more than others, but that really is in terms of the support. But in fairness, council, I've probably not really. No, I haven't.
If that's okay, Madam Chairman, update on, you were saying about puppies bought during lockdown. We had the dog warden in last week for a visit, and he was advising that they are already seeing an increase of dogs being handed back that were bought during lockdown that people can either no longer handle or can no longer afford to keep. And he said that one of the biggest issues at the moment is that those dogs have not been socialised. So he's having to do a lot of training with those dogs to try and get them socialised before they can then go on to one of the dog rehoming centres. So I think it's probably something we're going to need to keep on the radar, because I think it's only going to get worse before it gets better, given the current circumstances.
Thanks, Josie. Do we have any other questions for Alan? Oh, Philip.
Thank you. You quoted 50 complaints. Were those 50 individual ones or different ones? And my question really was, how confident are you that you feel getting complaints brought in? Do you seek those, or?
So they were those 50 complaints, the one that have come pretty much through the call centre, somebody saying this is going on, or I've noticed this, can you look at it? So I'll go and research that. I generate quite a few of my own complaints as well. If I think it's probably well known I'm an ex-copper, and if I see something, I've struggled to leave it alone, and I tend to sort of chase people down. I mean, there's a lot of people out there who are still breeding illegally, and I will get around to all of them at some stage, I'm sure. But there's only one of me, that's the trouble. So if you start an inquiry off, and it does lead to lots and lots of other things. I've obviously now, I think we're quite well established here, and because we host all the animal meetings, we've got a very wide network now across both counties and the police, and we've got lots of good friends now in the animal world, and people are talking to us. So that they come from, I mean, that 50, they've come through the call centre pretty much. Lots of others, there's probably another 50 that, you know, we've sort of sniffed out of our own volition, as it were. question.
Yeah. Just
I think I have to be a bit careful because you can actually have too much information. You know, we still have to look after our renewals and our good licensed people, you know, but it's manageable. During lockdown, it was almost unmanageable, but now it's tailing off a little bit and we're starting to be able to, you know, do what we're supposed to be doing. I mean, some of the things I'm not doing well. I should be doing yearly visits on every business, but the really, really good businesses, you know, you don't need to. I mean, it's a statutory obligation, but I will ring them up instead of visiting because I know I've been around there. I know that we've spent a lot of time front loading all the work that needs to be done. And I'm hoping now that lockdown's proper finished, that I should be able to spend a lot more time with those people. But, you know, I will always visit ones that if I'm just passing or, you know, that sort of thing. So.
Josie.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Sorry, I just wanted to interject there because Al's underselling himself slightly there. Would you explain a little bit about some of the work that you've done with the different partner agencies and different agencies that are out there where people are advertising? So things like where you're getting their adverts taken down off of websites and in particular the Kennel Club one.
So, so when we do enforcement work, when we talked about earlier on about different ways to skin a cat, so I can basically take away your ability to advertise, and not just animals. I can take away your ability to advertise anything online, because we've made contacts not only with all the other local authorities and the police, etc., but we also are able to do with certain bits of paperwork, if you like. We're able to request to firms like Pets at Home, Gumtree, all those sorts of where people sell dogs, we can have you taken down. And then you go and get another email address and we'll take that down as well. So what we're doing is we're removing people's ability to sell. And that doesn't take a lot of time. Whereas a prosecution, you know, it's pretty sexy doing a prosecution, let's be honest. You put it on the front page of the East Anglian Daily Times, but they'll be back again. And what does it prove? But if we get more bang for our buck, taking down websites, taking down, you know, people's ability to sell things, and I'll always find you. And they're like criminals. They'll criminals, but they will do it for a bit, and then they'll find you, and then we will stop you. Or you can be legal, which is what you should be, because then that promotes good animal welfare. And the one thing about this job is that we speak for the animals. That's what we do, and that. If you ask me what my fundamental approach to this job is that we speak for the animals because they can't speak for themselves. And if you go to a Breckland licensed dog breeder riding school or anything, then you know that Josie and I, or both of us, have been round there and we've inspected you, and you should have some reassurance that that's been done properly and that your animal will be looked after or your children will be looked after, because for me, dogs are family members, and I've got dogs, so I always major on dogs. Every place that I've been to, I would leave my dog with or go there. And that's what we provide, I think, to our customers of Breckland, is the reassurance that it's been done properly here. And you can go there, and if there's a complaint, then please contact me and I will look into it for you. And I think I'm really quite proud of that. And it's really, I think it's something very worthwhile having, what we've achieved.
I'd just like to thank Alan and Josie for doing such a fantastic job, and I'm now going to call you Dr. Doolittle. No, it's lovely and gratifying to know that you're looking after all the best interests of the animals, because we do live in a very animal orientated area. So it's really comforting to know. So thank you.
Thank you, Tina. Susan?
It just occurred to me with all this hot weather recently, and what you were saying earlier, that it's better to get people on board rather than prosecutions. I was just wondering if you get complaints or referrals from people that isn't really in your remit, that they're not animals, for instance, that are licensed. Are you able to refer that to other agencies who might deal with things?
And absolutely we are, because of the things we've been hosting here. obviously I know all the names of all the police officers involved working with animals. I'm good terms with all the RSPCA folk because our paths have crossed many times. I don't know if you think, for instance, about a dog in a hot car, that's always going to come down to the police first because, you know, they've got that immediate, they'll go around, smash the window and get the dog out, you know. So yeah, we have put out some bits and pieces around it. I think I was chatting to one of the councillors this morning. There's nothing wrong with freezing a litre bottle of mineral water and then putting it somewhere else for your dog to sort of sit around. There's a lot of places that are doing that with the small furries. You know, a lot of pet shops are doing that. They're putting in small bottles of frozen water and the animals are loving it, you know, and it's all these things. So it's getting that message. And obviously this is in the public domain, so people hopefully hear what I've said and be able to do that as well. But anything, if I don't know or can't deal with it, then I know someone who can. And that's been quite useful, I think, for us. So to answer your question, Councillor.
Yes.
Alan, thanks. That's excellent. It's good to hear about your cross-county seminars, which have been such a success with the RSPCA vets and police rural crime officer working towards best practice. I mean, they were really good. I look forward to the next ones. Your work, Alan, has been exemplary. And as you said to me, it's all about the animals. Thank you very much. I know, as you say, there is no hiding. I will find you. You're certainly and most definitely value for money. And I've just finished by saying animals can't vote, but we can. Thanks very much, Alan.
Thank you.
Alan, you're free to leave if you've got things you want to get on with. We'll move on to item 8, which is the Senior Licensing Officer to provide briefing on Taxi and Private Hire Disabled Persons Act 2022. Josie Hoven.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. We'll be with you momentarily. Thank you, Madam Chairman. So we have a new piece of legislation that has come in that directly affects taxis, taxi drivers, private hire drivers and operators. The new legislation is the Taxi and Private Hire Vehicles Disabled Persons Act 2022. It took effect on the 28th of June this year. It amended the Equality Act 2010 to introduce new and amend existing duties for local authorities and taxi and private hire vehicle drivers and operators. It aims to ensure that all disabled people can use taxi and private hire services with the confidence that they will not be discriminated against. And licensing authorities now have an important role to play to ensure requirements are in place to implement this effectively. The licensing authority has some key actions that we're now putting in place, is actually in progress at the moment. So the licensing authority must maintain and publish a list of licensed taxis and private hire vehicles that have been designated as being wheelchair accessible, also known as WAVs under the Act. We have to advise drivers and operators of their responsibilities under the new Act, both as a WAV driver or a non-WAV driver, because both are affected. We also need to advise drivers and operators of exemptions and how to apply for an exemption, which I'll go into shortly. We also need to ensure that the licensing authority has a robust policy in place for the application process and also the consideration of those exemption requests. So the new requirements for drivers and operators, just to give an overview, all taxi and private hire drivers are subject to these duties under the Equality Act, to these amendments. So they must accept the carriage of any disabled person, provide them with reasonable mobility assistance, and carry their mobility aids, all without charging any more than they would for a non-disabled passenger. They also must provide any disabled passenger who requests it with assistance to identify the vehicle that's to be used at no extra charge. So as a guide to the kinds of things they're going to have to do are basically, if they have a wheelchair, to carry the wheelchair, and dependent on the vehicle, if it's a WAV vehicle, so a wheelchair accessible vehicle, dependent on whether the passenger wishes to remain in the wheelchair or not, they have to carry both the passenger and the wheelchair. So anybody driving a wheelchair accessible vehicle where a wheelchair with the passenger inside the wheelchair must be trained and understand how to get that wheelchair and passenger on board safely and also exit safely. For those who don't wish to remain in their wheelchair but travel in the taxi, then they obviously need to help them inside of the taxi and then also be able to get the wheelchair in, depending on whether it's a collapsible one or an electric one, etc. So there's quite a bit of work that the drivers are going to need to do. Now, in the majority of cases, and I would have to say all of the cases with Brackland where we have wheelchair accessible vehicles, the drivers, certainly the ones that we've met anyhow, have all have good knowledge of how to get people in and out of the wheelchairs in and out. We're sort of on the ball on that one already. They also have to make sure that they take reasonable steps to make sure that the passenger is comfortable. So again, dependent on whether they remain in their wheelchair or whether they come out of it. And also give any mobility assistance as reasonably required. So if a person needs help getting in and out of the vehicle, other than just a wheelchair, they have to give that assistance as well. And they must load luggage in and out, kind of things we would expect of any passenger, not just disabled passengers. So they must accept the carriage of any disabled person, provide them with that reasonable mobility assistance, carry their mobility aids, all without charging any more for as they would for a non-disabled passenger, and provide any disabled passenger who requests it a way to identify that vehicle. So depending on whether they're visually impaired or whatever that might be, it might be that, yes, we're going to come and knock on the door, the driver is going to give you his name and tell you what company is from, or a description of the vehicle and the registration number or the plate number. It's just to give that additional assistance where it's required. So private hire operators are also affected. They are going to be required to accept bookings for or on behalf of any disabled person. And this is the caveat, if they have a suitable vehicle available. Because while we have wheelchair accessible vehicles, not everybody who is disabled needs a wheelchair accessible vehicle, but we need to make sure that if they have a disability, they can get in and out of the vehicle that's supplied for them. So operators will be receiving some information to advise that when they're taking bookings, they need to start asking more questions and making sure that they are supplying vehicles that people can get into and out of. So what is the purpose of the new act? It is that disabled people should be able to travel by taxis and private hire vehicles free from any fear of discriminatory treatment. The changes introduced through the 22 Act will provide disabled passengers with the reassurance that they will receive appropriate assistance wherever they travel without being charged extra. So that's just a whistle-stop tour of the new Taxi and Private Hire Vehicles Act. As you can see, we've got a little bit of work to do in informing all our drivers. We do have an up-to-date list of wheelchair accessible vehicles on the website, and we have done for a number of years now, but that will be being updated again shortly. We're currently down on Tascombe at the moment. It's actually, there's some web work going on in the background, so we don't have Tascombe currently this week. Should be back on by Friday, fingers crossed. So we will be looking at updating that on a regular basis, month by month, just as we do some of the other things that are on the website as well. But we've got to put a policy in place and also just get some information out to the drivers and operators in the next 2 weeks. It's going to be quite busy. Are there any questions?
Will they be, will you list them separately as to, or make the operators list them separately as to whether they have to be going in the wheelchair in it or able to get in it? For instance, I've got a Seat Alhambra that I get my dad in, but he can't sit in the chair, but the wheelchair can get in. So, you know, there'd be cars that we can do one. Will that be differentiated between the operators?
So the list that will appear or is on the website is they are wheelchair accessible vehicles, and yes, it doesn't show it at the moment, but it will show whether passengers can go inside, because obviously it's about headroom, etc., or whether they are just wheelchair vehicles that can accept a wheelchair but with the passenger not in them. That's the intention, is to actually have a list that shows both. But obviously not everybody who's disabled is in a wheelchair, which is something else we're also trying to get across the message across the board, is that not everybody who has a disability necessarily has a wheelchair. Some have other aids, some don't have any at all. So we just need to make sure the message is out there for all of our drivers and operators.
Will there be some training for the, you often get drivers that don't want to accept dogs or guide dogs so that would be classed as a disability as well for the blind to be able to get in with the dog. There have been excuses with drivers having asthma and they need an exemption certificate for that.
Yeah, so that's been covered off in this act as well. If any driver feels that they need an exemption, that's the process we now need to get into place, which is the policy part of the work. So yeah, they can apply for an exemption. We've just got to work out on what grounds. So my immediate thoughts are there would need to be something from their doctor to tell us that they're not fit to actually hoist somebody in. So yeah, we've just got to work out what those are. And you're absolutely right. If you are unable to carry passenger assistance dogs of any description, then you need to have an exemption certificate. That's already covered under the legislation currently.
Casey, as far as the taxi or private hire vehicle coming to collect somebody who has a wheelchair, what about the charging? There is obviously a time factor for assisting somebody into the taxi and getting the wheelchair into the taxi. I'm presuming that the charge doesn't start until the wheels start rolling.
That is correct, Madam Chairman. That's one of the intentions of this piece of legislation, is to make it fair across the board so that disabled passengers are not being penalised for that additional time that is required to get them in and out of the vehicle, or their wheelchairs stored and stowed in the vehicle too. The intention is that the journey only starts, as you say, once the wheels start turning.
Yeah, thanks for that. Obviously the policy is, you've done well to get it all on paperwork and let the taxi drivers know. My concern is, although you answered one on by saying they can apply for an exemption, is that several of the taxi drivers are their later years of life, and some of them are the people who've had, let's say, injuries through previous work. It's a bit concerned that assisting, and I know when my wife was alive how difficult that was to be able to lift her about and assist her. And some of these wheelchairs are quite heavy. So for the sake of the health and safety of the taxi drivers, I think they need to make sure we need to be very clear on the exemptions for those sort of things, not to discriminate that they just opt out for the easiest reason. I think as a council, we've got to be a little bit kind on that sort of thing, that we could be accused of causing people basically injuries by forcing them to comply with the rules.
I totally agree, and I think it will be on a case-by-case basis. Obviously, those that are applying for the exemption know what their restrictions are, it may be, as you say, a mobility issue. They may not be strong enough to do it. When you are given an exemption, you have to display that in the vehicle that you are working in. So if anybody is picking up a hackney carriage from the rank, they will be able to see that that person has an exemption and therefore is exempt from having to do any of those duties. But for us, it's just going to be a case-by-case basis of what those reasons are. It won't be a carte blanche, well, you don't want to do it, therefore here's your exemption. There have to be reasons why. But I think you're right. I think it has to be on a case-by-case basis.
Linda.
Is there already, or is there going to be any kind of guidance or training for taxi drivers who have no experience of helping people in and out of wheelchairs and wheelchairs in and out of vehicles as to the right, I won't say wrong, but the right and best way to deal with this? I've never got paid for it, but I've done a fair bit of it with my parents as they got into their 90s. And I know that you can get it wrong. And on one nightmarish occasion, got my father half in, half out of the car, or out of the wheelchair, and he couldn't move. Took 3 of us to get him into the car. Things like that mustn't happen to a taxi driver. Can we offer any kind of training, guidance? What kind of adaptations? I've got other questions too. I mean, the other thing I was wondering is, have we any indication of what percentage of the current taxis have a vehicle that can be used for a wheelchair entire with passenger, and B, how willing or unwilling are the drivers to take all this on?
So I don't have a percentage for you, but we do have a number of vehicles. I think there were between 10 and 15 when I last looked at the list online. I couldn't tell you at this precise time how many of those were actually on board wheelchair passenger combinations, as in they would take the passenger in the wheelchair on board. There are a number of them out there. I've inspected some of those myself over the years. At the moment, it's not part of our policy that there's any mandatory training. However, most of our operators do, when they have the wheelchair accessible vehicles, put their drivers through their own training to make sure that they can use the safety points, because there are different versions in every vehicle, as you can understand. There are some councils that have made it mandatory compulsory training through their policies. It may well be something that we need to look at going forward, but we've not had any issues thus far. But yeah, I think it's something we're going to need to look at now that this act has come in. Maybe something that we need to review in the policy moving forward.
Thank you, Paul. Philip.
Thank you. The operators are meant to take disabled people, but there is a caveat there about if the car was suitable. How are you going to assess that?
Okay, so it won't be for us to assess an operator's, the vehicles that operators have got, obviously. If they are a wheelchair accessible vehicle, as in one that a wheelchair can be taken into, they will appear on the list. The operator will be advised at the time he licenses that vehicle that it will appear on the list. It will be for the operators when they're taking those bookings to ask those additional questions. In the main, I haven't come across anybody who was in a wheelchair that hasn't mentioned that fact when they made the booking, because they want to make sure they get a vehicle that can actually take them. I think that one of the newest parts of this is that this act is also making any general vehicle that can fit a standard wheelchair into it. Obviously, the drivers are going to have to learn how to collapse those wheelchairs to get them in. I think that's going to be the biggest change, because in the main, the vast majority of drivers probably haven't had that training. But I do think it's going to be down to the operators, and that's what we've now got to inform them is. It's down to them to ask those additional questions whenever they take any booking. Are there any disabilities we need to be aware of? Is there a wheelchair? Is it one that a passenger is going to need to stay in? Because obviously they need to make sure they send the right vehicle for the right passenger.
Committee, do we have any other questions for Josie on her presentation? Can't see any hands up. So Josie, thank you very much for the presentation on disabled people will not be discriminated against. and that there's now a list of WAVs. It is WAVs, isn't it? Yes, it is WAVs, wheelchair accessible vehicles, and your presentation on taxi and private hire vehicles. It's a huge piece of work, and I know it's in an excellent, safe pair of hands. Thank you very much. We now move on to item 9, which is an update on teamwork from the Senior Licensing Officer. Thank you, Josie.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Sorry, I hope you don't get fed up with my voice. So just a quick, I wanted to give you a quick update because obviously I think we postponed the last meeting, didn't we? So it was really just to give you a brief overview again of what we've been working on within the team. Obviously had Keith's update earlier about the team changes. So I wanted to give you just an update of what we're still continuing to work on really. So we've issued quite a few premises licenses since April. So I'm kind of giving you the first quarter of the year. So we have a new license for Seno Park, which is the Licensed Music Festival. It's a 1 weekend only this year license. They only applied for 1 weekend for this year. It's not a year-on-year license. And it is for the 2nd to the 4th of September. We have a new wedding venue at Kursville Barn that's now licensed. We have a new Lidl at Watford, which I believe is not quite built yet. Yeah. No, but they've got a license. So that will be in place for when they open. Bucharest in Thetford, thank you, also has an off-sales license. We have a new gin company that is moved into our area called Tap and Tipple. It's mainly off-sales, but they do a little bit of on-sale promotion. So they have a new license. We have a license for Vila Country Caravan and Camping. That's some regulated entertainment and on sales of alcohol. We have a new license at KFC drive-through in Thetford for late night refreshment. And we also have the Little Vegas Adult Gaming Centre in King Street in Thetford was granted a premises license under the Gambling Act 2005. So we've been quite busy with new licenses, and obviously they're just the big ones under the premises license side of things. Under the Licensing Act, the team have carried out a number of joint visits to problem premises in regard to noise in the main with the EP team. We've been able to give advice on conditions and provide assistance with regard to review procedures should things not improve. So there's a lot of compliance and investigation work that's still being undertaken with those premises. So I'm not going to mention who they are. The amazing Platinum Jubilee weekend was, I think, probably the biggest unprecedented number of temporary event notices we have ever seen for any single event since I've been in licensing. And at Breckland, we received 41 temporary event notices just for events, community events, etc., for the Jubilee weekend. So it was really positive to see after the COVID period that so many local groups, town councils, parish councils, etc., were putting on events for the Jubilee weekend. The team did work really hard on making sure that information was out there so that nobody got their 10 in too late. And in the main, I think we only had 2 that were borderline. In the main, we managed to get that out on social media and on the website and everything, and it worked really, really well, but they did work really hard on that. We've also had a safety advisory group meeting, which Keith touched on earlier. That meeting was held with all our partner agencies on the safety advisory group and was held with the event organisers for the Maui Wowie Festival and also for the new one at Seno Park. So they've been in around this table, had a meeting with all the partner agencies and discussed any of the issues in the risk assessments, the plans for the event, etc., and that work is ongoing with different officers and different agencies. There will be pre-inspection visits taking place and then inspections during the events as well. And that's obviously, it kind of cross borders quite a lot of the whole of environmental health because they all have food vendors. There's obviously noise issues to consider to make sure that they're monitoring, etc., etc. So it's a real environmental health problem to tackle, if you like, to make sure that they are compliant. So it's a really big thing that's happening there. With the taxis, the new Hackney carriage fares were introduced on the 8th of April. Hackney carriage owners have until the end of August to get their meters updated with the new tariff, and that's going really well. All of the larger operators have updated their meters, and many of them actually staged the fare increase. So the meters were all updated to the new fare, but they didn't implement the highest rate of fare. They just did it in increments. Many of them are now charging the maximum rate. It seems to have gone down really well. There are a number of them still offering a reduction on the meter price, so that the top price that can be charged. It seems to be overall being accepted actually really well. To date, and again, we haven't received any complaints from members of the public about the fare increase. And despite some reservations, shall we say, from the trade when we first introduced it, they all seem to have taken it on board. So we're really pleased with that. So we wanted to thank the committee for pushing that through and getting that out there for them, because with the increase in associated costs for the taxi drivers, with the cost of living and the cost of fuel, as well as all the associated on cost for drivers, I think it was quite timely that we managed to get that pushed through as quickly as we did. So thank you for that. We're receiving a lot more inquiries from potential drivers, most stating that the fare increase has made them think about working in Brackland. So where other neighbouring boroughs, shall we say, may be struggling to get drivers, we seem to have made them want to come and work in Brackland, which I suppose is a good thing, because at least it means that the service is out there. We're just very grateful that we also got the policy put in place last year, so that we have a really robust policy. So, you know, we can be quite firm with them on what the committee expects, what the council expects of them before they will be licensed by us. So that's working really well. Al and I were actually part of a joint special operation, Road Policing Action Day in Thetford in May. And we took part in the operation, which was held at the Thetford Forest Retail Park, alongside many areas of the police and HMRC. They had, I'm going to ask you for your input on this as well, but I found it really interesting. We had outriders on motorbikes and ANPR going on to decide who was being pulled over. We had a lot of trucks, didn't we? A lot of trailers and a fair few taxis that they went and pulled over for us. They brought them back in, and then we got to inspect them and go around them and everything. And I'm really pleased to say that of all the Brackland ones that we inspected, I think all of them passed.
Yeah.
Whereas the 4 that we inspected with a police officer that were not from our district, not one of them passed. Well done to our drivers out there for adhering to the rules. We were really pleased with that. But I think it was a really interesting and just really good day, wasn't it?
It was. I mean, the police were there. They were pulling a lot of vehicles. They took quite a few vehicles off the road, no insurance, which is immediate off the road. I mean, there was some quite shocking things there as well. There was a sort of scrap truck, which in a terrible state, and it didn't have a diesel filler cap. It had a rubber glove on it. Which is funny, but you know, if you go around and obviously the diesel spills and the motorbike comes down and crashes, it's disgraceful, really. And that wasn't half of it, but the police put an awful lot of resource around it, and they did really, really well. And as Josie said, it was very reassuring to know that our drivers, I think the worst we had was slightly dirty car, which is, you know, but other people had all sorts of things missing. There was some of them had no first aid kits, and these are important things. No fire extinguisher, which is actually really important. So we was pretty pleased, I think, with the way our drivers conducted themselves. Yeah. I mean, you know, the news soon got round that we were there, and I'm sure they started avoiding us, councillor. But it was very, very reassuring. I think it just goes to show that the work we've done with our drivers, you know, they've responded very well. So it's quite pleasing.
So I think that was really positive. It was a really good day out for the 2 of us to actually go and see and work with these other partner agencies as well. We now have some really good contacts on that side, don't we? And then on the animal welfare front, one of the things Al didn't update you on was that he also supported a work experience candidate from one of the local schools. Just recently, we had a number of work experience candidates in over 2 weeks, I think it was, but they were here for a week at a time because she was very interested in animal work. So Al was able to show her many different facets of what kind of work is available in the animal kingdom, as it were, in the animal world. And she gave back a very good report on how things had gone and how much she had enjoyed the time with Al. So thank you for that. On the compliance side of things, we have been doing a lot more work with street trading. We're seeing an increase in the number of new vendors attempting to trade here in Breckland, which is causing us a little bit more work. And we've got Paul on the case already. He's now the street trading guru. So obviously we need to make sure that they are licensed to be in the Breckland area after we consented all the streets here in Breckland. So there's a lot of work going on with that at the moment. They just keep popping up everywhere at the moment. Trading standards have, we've received some intel from them that they are conducting some investigations on illicit and illegal tobacco establishments where those products are being sold illegally. So there is some trading standards and police work going on that, and they're keeping us informed and involved in that. I cannot give you any further detail on that at the moment because obviously that's what investigation work is still underway. And we also have a number of table and chair issues around the district that we are also investigating, where we're trying to work out whether people actually need licenses and why they haven't applied for them if they do. So there's a lot of work going on that in the background at the moment too. And one of the last things is just that from a licensing team perspective, we have been working very closely with the web team to develop more web forms so that people could go on and apply directly online. The first phase is almost complete with 99% of the first phase forms being available on the website. The temporary event notice applications currently are the only ones that have an online payment facility as well. And the team has noticed that that's made a massive difference to their workload because they come in directly with the payment already on there. They're not spending, 2 or 3 days intermittently trying to chase people to take card payments from them. So it's a really valuable piece of work, and we just need to work on the second part of that, which is actually getting those payments being taken on all of the other forms as well. So it was just to update you on that really, and I think that's all the updates I have. Thank you.
Richard.
Yeah, I think I'll get it right. The Milwari or whatever the event you mentioned. Yeah. Last time that was on, and I did ask, and that hasn't happened, that ward members are notified directly when these events are coming on, so we are aware of what's going to be hitting the district. As far I know, I've been a bit lax through circumstances, but I have no recognition or recollection rather of being notified of this event. And I know after the last event, perhaps the wind was in the right direction, but there was a lot of people in Scarman, the noise, and they say they got a bit high outside when they were breathing in. Sorry.
I'm sure Josie will have the particulars as well, Richard. But if she wouldn't mind, if I just dive in first and she can follow up with anything I've missed. I took this up with the assistant director and the manager just over a week ago, and I had an excellent response from Craig. And he's discussed the need for better consultation and liaison with parish councils and local residents, and agreed with the event organizer that they will notify the parish council and neighbouring parish councils. They did a flyer drop to local residents last year, but will look to extend this. And the flyer will include a contact telephone number where anyone experienced issues can call the event organisers. They will also, in the previous week, also notify the parish councils and the complainants where we had contact info about the event. And the event organisers have employed a noise consultant. They didn't have one last year and seemed to think it was our job. They're producing a revised noise management plan and are taking advice from our environmental protection team. And this will be presented soon for consideration. The noise consultant will be carrying out noise monitoring on and off the site during the event, and will have a direct radio link to front of house stage any complaints and issues with the noise, then they will act. The event organisers said they want to be seen as a community benefit and do not want to annoy anyone. And if that's the case, we will act immediately. It's believed most of the noise issues last year originated around the flavour parlour. This has been relocated, reorientated, and additional soundproofing. Headline acts will also be brought on earlier, 10 to 11 p.m, and lesser acts will still come on later, but they do not have their own sound crews and are easier to turn down or off. The event organisers still need to produce their health and safety risk assessments, fire safety risk assessments, noise management plan, and confirm finer detail. Craig made the point to them that they only had about 6 weeks to the event, and we will expect to see all of these things in suitable and sufficient form in the next couple of weeks for SAG members to consider. We don't want to be placed in a position where we get it at the last minute, don't have sufficient time to adequately consider and deal with any issues, and this point was widely accepted by SAG members. The SAG partners agreed about the event organizer left the meeting, but they will be notified. The SAG partners, police, the fire, the traffic management, the environmental health, food, health and safety, licensing, etc., will carry out a joint inspection of the site 2 or 3 days before the event. And if any of the SAG partners are unhappy, then the event organizer will be told to remedy it, and the SAG partners will stand united, i.e. these need to be sorted out or you will not be having the event. Breckland Council officers will be present before and during the event to monitor and, if necessary, enforce any issues. Josie, is there anything you want to add?
I think just to pick up on Councillor Duffield's initial question there, we are not contacting the local ward reps directly, but what we did agree, I believe with the chairman, was that we would have a large-scale event notification on the website, and I believe then services sent out an email last year, the idea being that any member could sign up for that rather than it being us directly sending it to people who weren't interested in it, because it seemed to be the easiest way of doing that. So that's available on the website. It does have those large scale events on it, and it also includes things like Weeting Steam Rally, which happened last week, and I believe Wayland will go on there as well, and Old Buckingham as well. So the big scale events will go on that large scale event notification page, so keep an eye on that one. You can sign up to it, and I believe Julie may need to come in here, but I believe if you sign up to it, then every time we update it, you also then receive an email to say it's been updated. I think click into it. Is that yes? Right, good. Just going back on the Maui Wari thing, we did a debrief with them last year because of the complaints, and I have to say the organizer of that was very on board with making those changes. And I know when he came to SAG last week, he had submitted some really good detail. There's still a few issues to be remedied, but he's very on board with making sure that this event does work well. So if he doesn't, he obviously was told at the debriefing meeting last year that people can put in for a review of the license if it doesn't go well this year. So I think it's in his best interest, the event organizer, to make sure that the event runs smoothly this year without too many or any complaints if at all possible. So yeah, I don't think we can do any more than that at the moment. And just to say that the SAG, as you heard from Keith earlier, is actually now up and running properly again. It kind of went off the scale, obviously, during COVID. We weren't able to hold any meetings in person. We were still notifying all of the responsible authorities and all of the SAG members of all of the smaller events that were happening. And we didn't really have any large scale events because we weren't allowed to during COVID. So that was still happening, but we're now back to having meetings in person when we have these large scale events. So going forward, hopefully, with that direct in-person contact with the event organisers, I think it's much easier to get the points across than it is sometimes just in an email that's pinged off. So I'm hoping we're going to see some big improvements this year. Obviously, Seno is a new one to us this year. It's actually, although we've had events at Seno Park previously, this is a new event. So it's going to be interesting to see how that one goes. But yeah, we have measures in place to go and do pre-inspections, and although we won't be on site all of the time, obviously we don't want to be there from when they start the music at lunchtime until 2 in the morning or whatever it might be. There will be intermittent by each of the teams involved going and doing inspections over the course of the weekend or the 2 days that they're running. So I hope that gives some reassurance that we're on the case.
Thank you, Josie. Richard, does that satisfy you?
I think for a ward representing anywhere, it would be more beneficial to get in on the early stages and be notified directly rather than, oh, hold on, I've got to go on that website, see if there's anything on this week. You go through your emails, and we all have a lot of other things to do at the same time. It would be handy just to have a quick email, bigger end, that rather than rely on going on the website, because I don't go on there and watch big events.
Josie, do you think it might be worth having a word with comms about, I don't know if you pick up on your phone or your laptop, Richard, when comms send out notifications about things that are happening in Bretland, it might be worth just asking them if they could just flag it up for members, Josie.
I will ask Nathan and see what can be done from that front.
Do we have any other questions for Josie? Mike?
Thank you, Chair. It's a small one. You mentioned tables and chairs at one point. Am I right to say that if a business, a retail business, it's a cafe or typically, wants to put chairs on a street that's controlled by Bretland, that you have to have a license, or they have to be, it has to be agreed? And can I ask also, do they pay for that service?
Thank you for that question. It's really good actually that you've asked that, because it's never straightforward, is it? So we are authorised under the Highways Act 1980, a particular section, to actually allow tables and chairs on the public highway, assuming that they meet certain criteria. But the public highway part is the important part. There is also a separate piece of legislation under the Business and Planning Act of, it was 2020, sorry, was extended from the end of September last year to the end of September 2022 because of COVID. So there are 2 separate pieces of legislation that we're dealing with, but they both primarily deal with the same thing. If the tables and chairs are on public highway, then we can look at it. The person who has the premises can apply for a license under either piece of legislation. And we would then look at it, look at the size of the space, what they're proposing to put out there, and then decide whether or not they can have a license or apply for a license, etc. There is a caveat to that, because there are some separate areas that are, although we may deem them to be public highway, are actually owned by other councils, whether it be town councils, etc. So it's never straightforward. We have to look into who owns the land, who looks after it, etc., etc. So I know there are some slight issues out there, but in the main, you have to be a food or alcohol premises in order to apply for tables and chairs license. There has to be some food element or some alcohol element to have that. So you couldn't be a dress shop and ask for tables and chairs outside, because that's not your business. You're not providing a cafe style, you're not providing coffee, tea, that kind of thing. So does that answer the question?
Almost, except for one complication, which is the definition of public highway. So the main street in Thetford, the High Street, is called King Street. It's allegedly pedestrianised. Does it still retain its public highway quality, even though it's pedestrianised?
Yes, it does. King Street in Thetford in particular does. Those businesses that are on King Street, we have, from recollection, 3 businesses that do have tables and chairs licenses. 4. I'm not sure what the 5th one is, but if you'd like to catch me afterwards. Yeah, Yes, no, you're right. I've forgotten about that one right at the bottom. Yes, yes, so you're right, there are 5, and they do all have tables and chairs licenses of one description or the other.
Thank you for that clarification, Josie. And over the land which is owned by town councils, because I'm aware of the fact that there have been questions raised over that land, and you've clarified that. Committee, any more questions for Josie? Did somebody cough? No? All right. Josie, was as always interesting to have your updates and to learn that, you know, the biggest number of tens ever received by the council for the Jubilee weekend. It's amazing. Will you please thank the team for all their hard work? And I'm sure the committee would like to thank you for making it all run smoothly. It's good to hear that taxi drivers are looking to work in Breckland now that we've got the new taxi driver policy being in place. Thank you very much, Josie. And thank you very much, committee. The next meeting, to note that the arrangements for the next meeting on Wednesday, the 19th of October. Gosh, we won't need the ventilation then. At 10 a.m. here in the Anglia room. So the meeting is now closed, and we'll now continue after a comfort break with the meeting of the licensed authority meeting.